What is going on, everybody? We're back with Float on Air. This is episode 11 of the Show Dash podcast, where we talk all things airships and flight, particularly through the lens of our company Float Air, which is building a categorically different type of lighter than air dash hydrogen-powered aircraft. As always, I'm joined by Nick Rogers, who is a wealth of knowledge in airships and history, especially when you throw the two together. We continue talking about the World War I era, and this week we focus more specifically on what was going on in Britain with airships, whereas in last week's episode and the one prior, we talked a lot about Germany. So stick around. We appreciate you joining us as always. If you like the show, consider liking and subscribing and sharing it with somebody else who you think might like it as well. We obviously acknowledge that we're covering a fairly niche topic here, but there is a really passionate community that loves talking and hearing about this stuff. So with that being said, and without further ado, cue the music.
For over 200 years, we have chased the sky. Gravity has tested us, but it has never defeated us. You're listening to Float on Air. Lift off, float on.
Oh, right. Float on Air, episode 11. Nick, I'll kind of let you dive right into this one because I know off air we were talking about not totally switching gears, but basically we had focused heavily on Germany at the beginning parts of World War I, and you had said, hey, let's spend some time talking about the Queensland.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'll let you kick off because, yeah, we haven't really spent too much time talking about Britain at the time.
No, absolutely. And the British experience of World War I in terms of airships was very different from Germany. And also, it's back then wasn't the Queensland; it was King George V, avid stamp collector, apparently, amongst other things, very naval.
Did you know there's a huge, maybe huge is not the right word, there's a defined community of airship and dirigible stamp collectors?
Oh, yeah.
I made the error of joining their Facebook group and posting in it one time, and somebody replied and was like, this doesn't have to do with stamps. It's like, oh, man.
So it is a huge, it's a huge, it's like subgroup of both airships and stamp collecting. I have to admit, I've never been that interested, although I do have a letter that was flown in the USS Los Angeles to Bermuda, and that's quite cool. I love Bermuda.
In an airship?
In the
USS Atlantis.
USS Los Angeles. Yeah.
Okay.
So, that's quite a cool thing to have. But yeah,
that's pretty
I think
cool.
I'm a nerd. I think those guys are way nerdier even than me.
Oh, yeah. It is always interesting when there is like a niche of a certain type of community, and then I will, even if it's something that I don't understand, I respect when they take it really serious.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I actually respect the fact that somebody was like, stop posting. I don't care if it's about airships. It's not about stamps.
Get out of our
And I'm
group
like,
if you don't want to talk about stamps.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, fair enough. You got me. That's funny. But okay, you said this was King George V.
George V, yeah,
Okay.
big stamp collector. I'm dragging things from my memory, but I feel like there's something about him having the creases of his trousers on the side instead of at the front. I don't know. Anyway, top monarch. But he was the King of England during World War I, and so we've been speaking quite a bit about the German experience, the Zeppelins, these massive silver cigars floating over British cities, dropping bombs, terrifying the inhabitants. These were huge in every sense of the word. Front page news. The Kaiser was heavily involved in approving targets, and they were really weapons of psychological warfare as much as they were weapons of military destruction. And then we come to the British experience, which is very, very different. There's no glamour to it. There's no midnight raids. There's no real newspaper headlines. It's unglamorous, exhausting, invisible sometimes, flying day after day, hours and hours and hours over miserable skies in the Channel, in the Eastern Atlantic, looking for submarines. That's what they were mostly doing.
Oh, interesting.
Rather than bombing cities like the Germans.
But they were looking, like, I'm assuming, okay, so they're flying over the seas. with telescopes, basically, and just
Well,
looking into the water.
I
What a
think,
boring job.
they would have they were doing convoy escort. We'll get into exactly what it is they were doing. So they had a defined sort of area that they were working in. But what it kind of turned out to be was one of the most effective uses of any form of air power in the whole of World War One, and that's Zeppelins, that's airplanes, bombing, whatever you name it, fighters over the Western Front, whatever. This was one of the most effective uses in terms of how it ultimately met its objectives.
Fair enough. I stand corrected. Well, I guess I don't stand corrected about it being a boring job, but
yeah,
that's awesome that it was actually effective, because the thing that's really stuck with me from our first World War One episode was the fact that Germany blew up 3 ships before they realized they shouldn't fly it low enough for rifle fire to reach it.
For people to be able to pick them off with a rifle. Yeah, good one, guys. But if you cast your mind back to, I think it was the episode before we started really delving into World War One, I did talk a little bit about where Britain was versus Germany, and it was in a really bad place in terms of airships. You've got Germany that's been developing these big Zeppelins for like well over a decade. You've got Count von Zeppelin being very militarily minded and very keen to promote airships and his Zeppelins as a military craft, and they'd also done good work with training crews and just developing the technology to quite a high level, given all the constraints they had. But Britain had a tiny fleet of small airships. Apparently they had 7 airships, and they only had 4 hangars to even put them in. So, they're not well prepared. They had tried rigid airships which are the same type of airship as a Zeppelin. And listeners may remember His Majesty's Airship Number 1 was nicknamed the Mayfly because it got brought out of his hangar and broke its back without even ever getting into the air. So they had abandoned, the Royal Navy had abandoned the idea of using rigid airships, and they had looked at using non-rigids or blimps, and this is actually where the word blimp starts to come into use in.
Oh, interesting! I didn't know that.
In World War One Britain, and we'll get to exactly what it means, because there are a few debated different things that where it might have come from. So you've got in World War One, when World War One's declared, the British airship scene is nowhere. It's useless. It's not doing anything. They're not flying over Berlin and bombing Berlin. But February 1915 is where the kind of inflection point came and the realization that something needed to be done. Because what happened, Germany had declared that all of the waters around Great Britain and Ireland were a war zone, and that any Allied merchant ship found in those waters would be destroyed by their submarines. So this was a crisis point for Britain, and the idea of a U-boat siege was kind of existential. And the Admiralty, the British Admiralty, was casting around for what on earth can we use to try and counter this threat? What can we? How can we spot submarines, and how can we scare them into staying submerged and not coming up and attacking our convoys? And they realized that airships would be, in theory, a good fit for this role. And this was early February. By the end of February, Lord Fisher, who was the first Sea Lord, i.e. the top of the Royal Navy, basically called an emergency meeting, and he said, we need airships, and we need them as fast as you can possibly produce them. So they cast around for how you could do this. How can you build a fleet of airships just like that with, no ready-made design, nothing? But down in on the Hoo Peninsula in Kent, and weirdly enough, I was there in January doing a little walk along the Thames coast. It's kind of where Charles Dickens and Great Expectations is set. There was a Royal Naval Air Station, and they had some spare aircraft, as in heavier than air aircraft. The BE-2C biplane, which was like a standard biplane, nothing special at all. But they were lying around, nothing to do. They also had a deflated airship hull around as well, and basically people put two and two together. They realized that they could take these aircraft fuselage, take the wings off, take off the elevators, keep the engine, keep the cockpit, and then sling it all under this spare airship hull, and you fill it with hydrogen and you fly it. And from conception to flight was less than 3 weeks.
Wow.
To get this done.
Wow. That is fast.
And that is, we always, I mean, I don't know if other nations have this view of themselves, but British always have this thing about we sort of muddle along, we make the best of what we find, and we fashion a way through. It's not always pretty, and it's not always brilliantly planned, but that's exactly the approach that they took in this case. And this March 1915, this airship was called the Sea Scout, and it became a class of airship. And Lord Fisher saw it, and he said, "Right, I want 40 of them." So
holy
they built
crap! Well, okay, a couple things on this. One, how nice it must be to have a unified way of categorizing yourself, UK. Because if you ask 10 Americans to categorize us in a similar way, you'll get 11 answers. So that is pretty interesting. And yeah, certainly fitting for what they did in that circumstance. That is insane to literally ship something that fast is wild. Where do you even start to manufacture 40 airships back then? What year was this? This was 1912?
This is 1915.
15. Okay.
So we're into the second year of the war, and the I think the saving grace for this one was that the kind of the hull that they used, the cockpit and all that, was basically an adaptation of the standard biplane of the day. So there's a lot of these knocking around.
You had mentioned that this became categorically its own type of ship.
Yes.
I love that not only did they pull together what they had to make this work, they did it quickly, and they categorically created something new, which is exactly what we're trying to do with Float. Like, we're trying to categorically make a new type of craft that combines a lot of the best parts of existing craft, but in a different way than people are currently doing it. Which is why we use the term float craft. That's like exactly, that was the part that you had mentioned. You quick slid it in there, and I wanted to make sure to touch on it because that is like incredibly relatable to what we're working on in that way.
Yes. Hopefully you're not using parts that are lying around in a random hangar in the middle of nowhere.
Not for production, but although the prototyping is pretty... there's rudimentary work being done in the prototyping because that's the only way to test things at a low cost to make sure it works. Yeah.
Well, this was the Sea Scout, and by the end of the war in 1918, Britain had actually built almost 160 of these airships, and they were cheap, £2,500. They could be produced at scale. They were really simple to fly. It was kind of it was all a bit of a bodge and a fudge, but it kind of worked, and it worked for the task that it was needed for at the time. So I think maybe we'll have a look at, before we get into exactly what they were used for and why, because this wasn't the only airship that the Brits built during World War One. This was the beginning, but they expanded and they got bigger and better. So these Sea Scouts, these were the cobbled together ones we've just been talking about. The two people in these open air cockpits, and their job was to fly up and down the coastline, look out for submarines, and report back with what they saw. Then in 1916, you had the Coastal class, which had a crew of 5, and they could stay up for 11 hours, which meant they could go further out into the sea and operate in worse conditions. So you probably wouldn't want to be on one of these airships. As you said, it wouldn't be very, very fun.
Right.
Then you had the next one, which was the Sea Scout Zero, which was just bigger, and these became the backbone of the British force of blimps. They built 77 of these. These were stable. They had long endurance. They could still go out into bad weather. And then in the last couple of years of the war, the Brits were also building the North Sea class, which were bigger. They were 10-man crews. They could stay up for more than 24 hours. They had enclosed cockpits, and we will talk about them a bit later because they had some incredible stories of the things that they did and the endurance that they are able to have because of their design. And now, whilst we're talking about, like, I guess the different types of airship, the word blimp and where it came from. So there's two theories, one which neither is verified, but one I think is true, and one which I don't think is true.
Okay.
So the one which I don't think is true is that they were class airship B brackets limp, as in non-rigid, but that doesn't feature anywhere that I've seen in any kind of official document. So I don't think it's true. The other story, which again you can't verify, but it has the ring of truth for me, is that an officer flicked the gas bag of one of the early airships, and he listened to the sound it said, and he said, "Oh, that sounds like blimp." And you can kind of see it, can't you? You can kind of hear what that sound would be like.
That's okay. That's a more fun interpretation. So I'm gonna choose to propagandize that interpretation going forward. So
That's
for everyone listening, the official stance of Float on Air is that the word blimp came from the sound of actually flicking. I could see that.
You can imagine.
Like,
okay, so that's company policy now, is it? And when any new starters sign on, they have to sign in their contract that they agree.
Yeah,
that this is where the word blimp came from.
Float trivia: where did the word blimp come from? That's going to be in the our like hiring interviews going forward. So
where did it come from?
Pay attention. No, I'm just kidding. That's it is interesting. I like that one better as well. Also, yeah, I mean, okay, so the problem with the other theory is that there would be a record of that.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
if it was named
as an official
after
designation, you'd find it all over the place.
Yeah, because is it considered a Class B craft? Is that part even true?
I've never heard of that. So that would be like rigid airships being Class A. Or Type A. It's I think that's. I don't know where that comes from. I'm sure someone can trace that back. But to me, the sound makes more sense.
Yeah, if someone could show me that part was true, maybe I could buy it, but that should be easy to show because there should be a record of it somewhere. So yeah, I opt to not believe that.
Exactly that. So that's kind of the British airship fleet that they eventually built over the course of the war. But going back to the beginning of this, why were they using these? And it's because of the U-boats, the German submarine campaign. And to understand why it was so urgent, we go to April 1917, which is the worst month of the campaign against British or Allied shipping. And in that 1 month, German submarines sunk 373 Allied ships, nearly 900,000 tons of shipping. And this is in a kind of context where Britain was having to import 60% of its food and almost all of its oil. So the Royal Navy and the British government realized that if the losses kept up that same rate, that Britain wouldn't be able to continue the war past the end of 1917. So it was again existential for Britain, an island nation depending heavily on being supplied by sea. So that's when they started to develop the convoy system, which is one of those things that seems obvious, doesn't it? Don't let ships go individually across the ocean, group them together and get them escorted. And they came in from about May 1917. And from then, airships really came into their own because they weren't just flying randomly up and down the coast looking for submarines. They were escorting these convoys as far as they could in terms of their range. And the reason that they were so valuable is you've got, imagine a convoy which has a destroyer or a frigate on the surface trying to protect it from submarines. They can drop depth charges and they can listen to for submarines on hydrophones, but it can't see very far. Whereas an airship, 1,000, 2,000 feet up in clear weather, can spot a submarine on the surface at quite a long distance. And especially I think once the commanders knew, the airship commanders knew exactly what it is they were looking for, they could spot it at quite a range. And sometimes if it was calm, they could even see them if they were submerged. And so then the U-boat, if it's spotting a convoy and stalking it, has to think, well, do I come up and attack, or do I leave? And if it comes up even to periscope depth and there's an airship in the vicinity, then it risks being attacked. It risks its position being reported, and then the destroyers and the frigates coming to get it. And so what started to happen was that when U-boats saw airships, they wouldn't attack. They would go deep and they'd wait until the airship had gone or the next convoy came along. So it became that the very presence of an airship became a sort of psychological shield for that particular convoy.
That's really interesting, and that's very different than what I assumed when you first mentioned it. I was assuming they're like up and down coastlines and active areas with spotters just generally looking for submarines. And that's why I was like, wow, there's a lot of water out there. That is a very tall order. But specifically for the purpose of convoys, that completely makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, that's what they started doing. This is what, this is now the task that they were put to. And it is quite incredible. So there were, of ships in convoy, 257 were sunk by submarines. So that's 257 ships that were in convoys were sunk by by submarines. And of those 257, only 5 were lost whilst aircraft, including airships, were escorting the convoy. So there's clearly a real impact that they're having on the ability of the Allies to continue shipping stuff across the ocean to Britain. And there's actually an exception that proves the rule of this. And that's December 1917, an airship escorting 3 merchant ships out of Falmouth, and a U-boat attacked. And it attacked several times in the space of 90 minutes, and it sunk 2 of the 3 ships. So that was bad. But the point is, the detail is that the airship was 7 miles away. It had been called off its station, and the U-boat commander had waited and watched, and he had basically calculated the precise moment where the airship was far enough away that it couldn't get there. He wouldn't attack whilst the airship was overhead, and the moment it came back closer to his submarine, instead of finishing off the 3rd ship, he went. So that kind of proves that U-boat commanders understood the power that these airships would have.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a strong
strategy on it.
Deterrent. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And as you got towards the sort of last couple of years of the war, and you had these North Sea class airships that were really, quite serious. These big craft. They had machine guns and bombs, and they could stay in the sky for days on end if they wanted to, patrolling at 50 plus knots. So these were, you had good coverage, aerial coverage of convoys with these bigger, older airships.
So in summation, on the one side, we have Britain, who figured out a way to very practical use case for airships that were extremely useful and can be proven. And on the other side, we had Germany indiscriminately dropping bombs off the side of them, maybe hitting their target, but mostly not, and kind of burning through them left and right. and having, what was it, a third of their fleet destroyed by the second day of their use.
That's it. I mean,
not a great
fairness,
look for Germany, not going to lie.
No, and as we'll see when we do get back to the German experience, that lots of very brave airship commanders and people doing daring raids, but they just start to lose ship after ship after ship after ship, because these massive sort of tubes of hydrogen are not great when you've got aeroplanes that have developed enough to fly above them, drop bombs, fire incendiary bullets, whatever. It's you're asking for trouble. Whereas the Brits found a very specific role for these little airships, but one that suited them absolutely perfectly. So there are a couple of stories about just how great sort of endurance these North Sea class, so the bigger, older class of British airships were. So North Sea 3 was performing in April 1918. So we're heading towards the end of the war now. 20th to the 22nd of April, she did a flight of 55 hours long, escorting several different convoys at during that time. The next month, she did over 130 hours in flight in total, with one patrol lasting 33 hours, and another one lasted 24 hours. So these airships were out there for a long time, and if you just think about that, that's 50 plus hours in an unpressurized cabin with no heating, out in the North Sea weather, trying to catch what sleep you can, cooking on the exhaust pipes. And there are photographs of crew climbing out onto the engines in midair and doing repairs to the engines whilst the ship was still in flight. So astonishingly dangerous as well. Not something that I would be terribly keen to
yeah, no thanks. Once again, we're building unmanned craft for a reason, and
exactly.
the characters of history continue to amaze me with their bravery. I mean, definitely bravery. Like, I want to poke fun at like how dangerous it is, but it is honestly extremely brave, and we wouldn't have the advancements we do had people like that not existed. But it's also just crazy by today's standards.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, you got to have balls of steel to do almost any of the stuff that we've spoken about in any of these podcasts.
Well, and the one thing I love about this industry, and I've said this before, but it's that the people who are building it in a lot of cases are self-testing it. Like, it's not even like they're forcing other people to go up there. A lot of the times it's themselves being like, I'm going to go on this. Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? Oh, well.
Yeah, we've had a couple of those. I can think of a few things. Yeah. We made it a while with no deaths, but then it caught up.
Yeah, we had some deaths. Actually, we haven't had any specific deaths, I don't think, this time, but partly because Britain didn't lose that many airships in the war. But one of my favorite stories is again right at the end of the war, so September then November 1918. Is Captain Warneford in North Sea 11, so one of these larger airships. He flew in November a 61-hour patrol through mist, fog, rain, horrible weather in the North Sea. So they were obviously towards the end. They were tired, hungry, cold, thirsty, and I don't think we can really properly picture exactly how they would be feeling after that. But then he decided, right, we need some drinking water. So he located a British destroyer. He hovered his airship 20 feet above the masts, and he had his crew basically on ropes winch down gallon bottles of water, which got filled up, and then he'd hoisted them back up onto the airship and carried on his patrol. But the next day, they ran out of food. So they thought, well, what can we do? So they saw that there was a fishing trawler nearby. So they did the same thing. They went and hovered above this fishing trawler. They lowered a canvas bag and the fishermen put a bunch of fish in the bag. They hoisted this bag of fish up onto the airship, and they cooked the fish on one of the engine exhausts.
Oh, whoa.
So this is the kind of the make, do, and mend muddling through thing that I was talking about before. They're just using their initiative and doing what needs to be done on the scene.
Man, I mean, that is not doing great things for the UK's food reputation. Not gonna lie to you.
No. Fried fish on an engine. Oh, yes.
Yeah. No. Not even battered, just straight out of the ocean and engine fried. That's, I guess, yeah, I was going to say that's our second restaurant concept we've had. Santos Dumont had the like sky restaurant concept where they were just sitting at like really tall tables and chairs. I actually like that one better than this one, though. I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know the one that I'd rather get the invitation to.
Exactly.
Not fried fish on an airship engine.
That is maybe the most UK thing of all time, though. So,
I actually think this is a massive tangent, which we could talk about for hours. But I think UK food has a really unfair reputation because if it's done right, it's the best food in the entire world.
Oh man, that's a hot take. Well, okay, maybe we'll do a food episode and somehow try to find a way to tie it back to airships because we are short on time this week. But I would love to hear the justification for this because there's no way.
Well, yeah. I'll back it up.
For the record, I personally would give that crown to Southeast Asia personally, but that's just
the best food. I don't know.
I think the best combination of food is like Southeast Asia. If you combine like Japan with Thailand, with Vietnam, with a huge, like basically that corner of the world by far.
Yeah, I agree. And if you throw in India to that, and then you're sort of even bigger.
Yeah, no, fair enough. All right, well, we got a little bit off topic. I do kind of have to have us wrap, though, this week, Nick, just because I'm running short on time here. Is there anything we want to finish with? So for those listening, there wasn't a ton of news this week, either for Float the company or airships and lighter than air generally. So that's going to happen sometimes. Sometimes we're just not going to have a ton of news, and we will be more history-focused. But don't worry, Nick will fill in by insane hot takes like the UK has the best food on earth, which is
yeah, exactly.
Wow,
it's even better than news. That is.
That might be the title of this episode. Nick says the UK has the best food on earth.
I guess we're winding down, but just to kind of round out this story of how successful these little airships were in the final 15 months of the war. The Sea Scout type, so these are the smallest ones of all. They had over 10,000 patrols. Nearly 1.5 million miles flown across 50,000 hours of flying. And they spotted 49 U-boats, attacked 27 of them. So that was really a good outcome and a fantastic record for these little craft that started off as just being cobbled together from old junk that was lying around.
Yeah, junk to order of 40 to how many? You said they were able to successfully attack 27 U-boats?
Yep, 27. Either by attacking them themselves or by vectoring in.
Or initiating the attack. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's a really solid record. Like I was saying, relative to the other use cases of the time, I mean, that's...
Yep.
Can't argue with those results. Yeah. Awesome. Well, with that, we'll just give a quick shout out to Britain. You did it.
It was like a shout out to Britain.
Yeah, do we? I don't know. No, we do. I'm just kidding. I'll take every opportunity to poke fun at most of Europe that I get, so no worries.
Oh, yeah, no, so will I. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, with that, you guys, we know it's a little bit of a short episode, but we will keep them coming. And, of course, as there is more news in Lighter Than Air and with Float, there will be more things non-historical to talk about as well. But as you can see, there are tons and tons and tons of largely untold stories throughout history with airships. And so, Nick, thank you as always for being here to help deliver them. It is always a treat. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my number one nerdy passion. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. Take care.
See you soon.
You're listening to Float on Air. Lift off. Float on.